So I'm currently reading the experience of Israel going back to Jerusalem to rebuild the walls, rebuild the temple, and reconfigure their religious, spiritual lives, really. So we're really under the guidance and tutoring at this point of Ezra and Nehemiah, and then moving into Malachi as well. And there's a little detail that I'd actually never noticed before, a line that I'd never realised I'd read before, and I think there's something quite interesting and profound about it that I'll get to in just a moment. So the circumstance is that the people of Israel have been allowed to return to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple with Ezra, rebuild the walls with Nehemiah, and then continue on with their sort of spiritual reconstruction. But it is certainly not a straight path. There's all kinds of challenges, there's detours, it stops, it halts, it breaks down, there's opposition, there's letters written to try and release resources or get the opposition to back off, etc. And then we come to the arena where Malachi is getting involved. The priesthood and the people have been up and running with their spiritual lives for a little while, but you could say a very imperfect version of their covenant with God. Whereupon the first couple of chapters of Malachi are a very strong rebuke of the people, and particularly the priesthood, for not taking their role seriously, for not applying themselves to their faith and to the covenant that God has made with them and them with God. So he's giving all kinds of rebuke and correction and new direction for the people. And then in chapter 2 he's talking to the Levites and the priests in particular. For the lips of the priests are to preserve knowledge. To preserve knowledge. And when I read that, I was really struck that the calling of the priesthood was to preserve knowledge. In other words, to look back and to know their story, to realize with concrete conviction and faith where they had come from, to realize the path that their people with God had taken, and to be able to tell that story from their lips. That's the place where you speak it out. So they're not only to retain it, they're to articulate it as well. So they had to know about the Exodus, they had to know about the law, they had to know about the promises that God had made, they had to know about the failures, the successes, the unfaithfulness, the redemption. The great history of the story of Israel was to be within the shared social memory of the priesthood, and then also to be on their lips. They had to be able to articulate it. And so now, leaping forward from that moment to where we are today, we know that under the new covenant, one of the grand missions of God is to create a kingdom of priests. We're told about that all the way from Exodus right through to Revelation, to establish a kingdom of priests. So our priestliness is a part of this new covenant. So it's not just for pastors or missionaries or people who are elders or in leadership in the church. Everyone whose heart is yielded and open to God is now a part of the priesthood. We are the people who have a very particular responsibility to be able to represent God to our community and to represent our community to God, and it's sacred and mysterious trust. But the instruction of Malachi, I think, stays really clear, that the lips of the priest are to preserve knowledge, so that if we are the priesthood, it is our role and responsibility to know where we've come from, to know our story, to know the gospel, to know the new covenant, to know the message of the kingdom that Jesus preaches through his parables and through his life, to know the grand salvation of Calvary, and to know the hope of the Holy Spirit, both now and calling us forward into the eschaton beyond, and to have that knowledge and to have that on our lips. So Malachi raises his voice and rolls up his sleeves and calls them back to the center of their calling, really, and their mission and ministry. And so it comes to us too, that in our conduct, whether it's at the grocery store or at work or at home or at school or at church or wherever we might find ourselves, that we would be priestly in our conduct and in our words, and that we would somehow be able to steer and encourage and shepherd our community closer to God, just as the Levites were called to back in the day. So, a good reminder and refresher even from Malachi there. Till next time, peace.